Welcome everybody to the Doomer Optimism podcast. I am here with Magdalena Urioste. I met Magdalena, I think through some friends, was introduced to you, but she's here in Uruguay with where I am currently. And I want to start by having Magdalena explain, introduce herself and explain what her work is, and then later on in this conversation, we're going to talk about an event we attended together with a group of women, the Pampeanas Regenerativas Orientales, who are regenerative ranchers here in Uruguay, a group of women who hosted an event that we both attended. So welcome, Magdalena, and let's start by just having you, orient yourself to our audience.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, my name, as she said, Magdalena Urioste in proper Spanish, sorry. And but what I do is I am a farmer, as Ashley told you, and we do regenerative ranching. We manage a farm that is about 1,500 acres in the eastern side of Uruguay. And it all started by me hearing about holistic management of our natural resources, which made a lot of sense since I was raised and started producing as a traditional farmer, but never used chemicals on my land. However, some things didn't make sense in the way we were just dealing and managing the cattle in the farm. So once we started doing this holistic management, everything changed for us. We live here, my husband and I, and we have a couple who works with us, and we do beef, sheep, chicken, and then we have 2 or 3 dairy cows. And we made subproducts, butter. We make cheese and nearby neighbors. That's about our work.
I think it might be interesting to hear a little bit about your journey away from Uruguay and back, because a lot of the people who listen to our podcast are people who maybe have jobs in the city and are thinking, this doesn't resonate with me so much. I'm looking for some other way of life. So it might be interesting to hear your whole journey, around the world. I know you lived internationally and then came back home to where you were from.
Yes. I needed to live in the countryside because I really like that style of life. And in order to buy a ranch, which is what I wanted, in Uruguay, you need to have a lot of money. And so I decided to go abroad and find means to save that kind of money in order to purchase the ranch. So in Uruguay, if you're a female and you want to do that, either you inherit land from your parents or you marry a landowner, a rancher, and then your life is doomed to the city with your children, because we don't have schools or good schools all around the country. We just have universities and stuff in the capital. So none of those options were in my spectrum. So I had left the country in order to find that money. I lived in the States, where I tried to improve my English, and then I went to France and I improved my French, which I had studied back home. And then I did some translation and interpretation courses in the States and in France. And then when I finished my courses, I went to work in the States, in Washington, D.C., in this international, big international, what do you call the World Bank and all these.
Yeah, financial institutions. Yeah.
Yes, and the OAS, and those were the prospects. But I didn't like the ambiance, I didn't like the people, and I didn't like what they did. So I ended up working at a restaurant, and I started helping people translate Latinos who were trying to make a living there with no papers and nothing. But anyway, so I stayed about 2 years in the States, and then 1 year in France, and then I jumped into what was the real adventure in my life, which was Thailand and Vietnam. I spent about 30 years there, but in the middle of those 30 years, I had already enough money to start to buy a ranch and pay it in installments. So half of my life was there, and I always tried to. I lived in Bangkok, which was a very big city, very, very big city, very congested, very hot. I mean, it was not what I was used to live, because in Uruguay, as you know, this is a very rural country, and we only have 3 million people, and 2 million live in the capital. And over there, it's like, I don't know, but Bangkok is really big. And then I had a preschool. I opened a preschool for expats, and I did very well. I had a Thai partner, and when we were so big that we needed to expand, she asked me to open a second center in Bangkok in another area, which would take like about an hour and a half to reach. And that same length of time, if I jumped in an airplane, I could be in Hanoi and in Vietnam, where it was just opening. This was 92. It was just starting to open from being very communist to being a little bit less communist. So there were no schools for expats, and the expats started to come in. So I went into Hanoi. I loved it. And it was a smaller city, although very crowded as well, but they had winter and some French stuff that reminded me of home. And so I opened a second school there, at another kindergarten. And then back in Bangkok, we started a primary school after about 6 years in operation. And so that's how I was able to start saving money and come back in the year 2000 to Uruguay and purchase my farm.
And then when you came back, talk us through like what was it like when you got back on, back home, and tell us a little bit about your journey into holistic management.
Okay, coming back home was not easy. Single woman, and in this world of chauvinistic males in Uruguay, where the cattle ranchers are mainly males, as you know, and organic. So I was the weirdo in any group I tried to join, you know. So then I purchased a farm in another province, different from where I am now. And one of my neighbors sold his farm to, we were 4 neighbors in a little tract. And my neighbor sold to the industrial dairy production. So it was really polluted. The whole thing changed. And so I sold that land and came over to where we are now, which is a very hilly part of the country, and where everybody told me I was crazy to come here and sell that fabulous piece of land which I had before and come to this land which is very unproductive, blah blah blah. It was not a good business deal that I had made. But as I always say, I'm Basque and Scottish mixed, so I said this is going to work no matter what. And the good thing is that because it's very hilly, there's no agriculture, no chances of dairy production, nothing, no tractors in this area. So I knew at least I was not going to be polluted by my neighbors. And so we started seeing that some people came and told us that the experts, quote unquote, that we were not going to be able to have more than X amount of cows, and because the pastures were not productive, etc. So, well, at the beginning, when we first arrived here 80 years ago, it was difficult. We didn't know that the territory, the terrain, these grasses. We thought we were in prairie land, which was the other farm, and it was difficult. We didn't understand the territory, and so we were wondering if we indeed made the wrong decision. And my neighbors, who are Argentine British, one day pop up, and they bring me the Savory books, the Alan Savory books of holistic management. And for some reason, they had to end up in my hands. So I started reading those books, and everything just made so much sense. And I felt like such a silly person not to have realized that by myself, because I always say, oh, I'm very sensitive to nature and blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't only about not dropping chemicals, but it was about the whole system and how we are part of it. And if we don't see it as such, then we're doomed to fail. So that changed the whole way we looked at the way we produce and we deal with our natural resources here.
And we have had a few people on who do regenerative agriculture in different places around the world. But maybe somebody's listening to this podcast for the first time and hasn't heard those other episodes. What changes? Talk to me about the transformation that happens when you manage livestock this way.
Okay, when we arrived, this 1,500 acres that I told you, half of it is native woods and stones. So only half, the other half is valleys and prairies. There were 100 cows here and some bulls, and that was it. The 2 centimeters, if that high, and it was just like dry golf carpet full of very solid and many cow dungs. Yes.
Yep.
And the one thing I noticed when I arrived, and before we purchased the farm, we asked to sleep a night to stay over to see, the noises, how it felt and everything. When we woke up in the morning, I told my husband, there's no birds here. There were no birds chirping in the morning. It was just amazing. So regenerative, we've been into this journey now for 5 years. The past 3, I would say, have been very intensely organized, because it takes time to get into it. And we don't have any more solidified cow dung in the country. The birds wake us up in the morning. In fact, there was one of these bird I don't know, it's worldwide. They come to your land and they check the amount of the variety,
like the Audubon Society or something
like that. Yes, over 100 and something varieties they've seen in the country. This is only 5 years. The way we see our soil, we don't see the soil, but we feel it. So that now we feel like we walk on like a carpet, like a mushy carpet. It's really amazing. And I do like this, where before it was like this, because I feel that the ground has changed. And then we are now doing the EOV, which is the ecological outcome verification. And we started with a monitor last year. And this year they came to see those results. And already in 10 parcels that we have around that they are monitoring, we have increased our diversity in grasses. so in variety of grasses. So we can see that our cattle is of the country. Our neighbors have lost animals in winter because of the lack of grass. We don't have marvelous gay brown pastures at the moment, not yet. We're doing things step at a time because our resources financially are scarce. But thanks to that, we are learning a lot of things along the way about our environment, which need to be looked at. And in the meantime, we started subdividing the land. When we arrived, there were 11 parcels in the farm. Now we have over 70, and we still need 1,000 more. But we're coming along, and we see the difference. Like one of the parcels is about 120 acres, and just 2 pieces have been subdivided by, the measure is like maybe 4 acres each. Those 2 parcels are just so different from the rest of the same area. I mean, next to each other. It's amazing, amazing. Yeah. Plus the fact that we see the way the natural fauna has become comfortable in our territory because there's no threat. The cattle, we have 2 cells that they move around, so the rest of this ranch is empty. Well, all this started because one lady who's a friend of mine, she's Canadian, she also breeds Brangus as we do. She was the one who sent me the books, the Alan Savory books about holistic management. And then one day her friend came with the CEO of the Savory Institute to see our land. And so we had this talk and I showed them the transition. And that same day is when we started with the Pampeanas, thinking that the Pampas is our biome in this region of the world where we have these fabulous natural pastures, and they're still virgin, like 60% of the country in Uruguay is natural pastures still. So our mission is to try to keep those pastures as virgin as possible.
I haven't talked with you about this, but I know you met with the CEO of the Savory Institute, and is that somebody different from Alan Savory? Is this Daniela?
Yeah, that is Daniela.
So tell me about whatever you're allowed to talk about. I don't know if it's secret what happened in this meeting, but I'm curious about what this meeting was about, and how I know a lot of people who listen to our podcast are huge Alan Savory fans. So it would be really cool to hear firsthand what it was like to meet him and what all happened there.
Okay, first I met Daniela, whom I just told you she came over to see, because nobody was doing regenerative farming except for this Canadian friend of ours. But in Uruguay, there were no Uruguayan farmers doing it. So I was the first one doing this. So she was interested to see what was happening here in our ranch. So when she came, she's a smart cookie, and she brought a cameraman, and she filmed the interview, which is online, by the way, in the Savory Institute. And I was saying just what I told you guys. We had no birds. We couldn't breed. And in fact, this, I didn't mention to you, but these advisors told us to open a hotel, a tourist ranch, because we were not going to produce much meat here, much beef, because of the conditions of the land. And so we rid ourselves of the advisors, and we started doing this ourselves. So at the moment, we almost double the amount of cattle that we have in this unproductive land. And we have sheep, 100 sheep in 16 hectares, which is about 30 something acres. So we're managing the way nobody expected us to do so. So Daniela came when she heard what I had to say. There was also that same day, the person who runs the marketing side of INAC. INAC is the Uruguayan Meat Institute, and they deal with all the meat experts and quality of beef, and they're very, very active. The guy was here as well. And these two Canadian, Uruguayan, Argentine, Peruvian friends, I mean, they are from all over the place, but it's only two of them. They came along, and the three of us, together with Daniela and this other lady who was the secretary of INAC, we sat in the porch of my farm, and we started talking, the five of us, while the cameraman was filming. And we were talking about our experiences as ranchers or dealing with the business. And right there and then we decided, well, why don't we start this movement of ladies, pulling together for this cause? Started organizing a meeting here in Valle Sol, which is the name of our ranch. And Daniela helped us organize it. And she came along. She is a Pampeana. She came along, and we had Diana Rogers was about to come, but her mother passed away the day or 2 days before she was here. Susan Swartz, who's a writer, and she's quite well known as well. Christiana Musk came over because she's interested in knowing what other ladies are doing around the world. Argentine producers, Brazilians, and Uruguayans. We are the ones in the biome. So we were 50 ladies sharing 2 days here at home. And it was a grand feast because, first of all, nobody knew what regeneration was all about. I invited ladies from all over the country, different provinces, so this would start spreading. And it was really fabulous. This is how it started. And a lot of the ladies who came didn't even know what, but everything was paid by the Uruguayan Institute of Meat. They were interested. They know that this is coming. They knew this was coming, so they were smart. So nobody had to pay for hotels, and we had a grand, all organic, locally done food festival. And we made a point of telling people where this meal came from, and where this lamb came from, and where this and this and this. So we started putting some knowledge in their heads and it worked really well. And so after that day, we decided that we could have 2 meetings a year, just to keep growing and visiting different points of the country, so that we could make it easier for people who were in the north, for example, and don't want to move or it's too expensive. So this is September 2019. And then our next meeting is in May 2020, pandemic. So forget it. But we are stubborn, we're all female. And we met anyway. Yes, it wasn't in May, but we met in September. And then we met again the next year. And this year we just met, as you saw us in May in Rocha. And what was beautiful was that in December 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, or 21, sorry, December 21, yes, Alan Savory came to our ranch. And we had a meeting, and all the authorities who are related with ground, soil, water, whatever, beef, sheep, came over to our ranch. And after that meeting here, you could start hearing the word regeneration in Uruguay from the politicians, because they had no clue. So it's very interesting the way it's moving. It's fast. It's fabulous, and it's a big responsibility for us to carry this name on our shoulders, because there's a lot of interest. A lot of people are trying to move forward to do this, and they see the results. They see how much more economic it is, and how everything changes: your health, your ranch's health, your animal's health. It's just no return, no way back still.
And was Savory, how was the interaction between Savory and, I know the Ministry of Agriculture was there, and I'm assuming somebody from Enoch was there, so I'm wondering how was the interaction between him and them? Was there some skepticism, or was there just, you know, maybe an open curiosity, or how was it?
Well, the minister at that time was somebody else who's very pro this, but the current minister was the director of INAC then.
Okay.
So he was here and he was there. And the minister of environment was here, and the director and subdirector of INIA, which is the Institute of Research in Uruguay, of agricultural research, was here. And the committee of agriculture from the government. He came and he had a 1-hour speech where nobody moved, because he really knows what he's talking about, except this was summer, in December. There was a bird chirping in the window the whole time. I mean, this was like the background music, and it was so perfect. It was really nice. And yes, there was a lot of interest, a lot. There were a lot of questions on how to implement this way of thinking in a place where Uruguayans are very traditional, very methodical, and quite slow to changes. I say Uruguayans are, because I don't consider myself one of them. I change quite quickly. But the fact that they were interested, the fact that they're doing things, if well, you being here, you know that we just had like a sustainable, the first time expo last weekend, and things are happening which before we didn't even hear. The radio stations are, the rural radio stations are starting to add a section in their programs about regeneration, about sustainability, about organic. So the wheel is starting to move.
Yeah.
What Savory proposed was to stay away from politicians and political influences and see if we could do something parallel, so that no government or tendency, you know, left, right, center, whatever you call it, would be involved in a project such as this, you know, for the whole country, Uruguay. But I think it's something difficult for a government to commit. So that's why the Pampeanas are here for.
Yeah, and I think one thing we talk about a lot on this podcast of what's happening in the US too and around the world is there seems to be like less of an interest overall in trying to get the any level of government, but especially the highest levels of government, to do things more. So people are just taking things into their own hands, sharing information among themselves, making these kinds of networks. So like, yeah, there's a lot of parallels, and I think that is, it's, you know, it's a strategy that seems more resilient than hoping that the federal government will do something as opposed to just doing it yourself and sharing with like-minded people. And this seems to be the way. Before we get into the meeting we were in, I just want to make one quick comment. I was noticing that the Gates Foundation sent some people to come, I think, speak at Enoch, and my understanding reading the news articles was that there was a kind of like polite polite reception among the on the Uruguayans, like, you know, this is how we do things. We're not giving up beef production. We're not going to become vegan. We're not going to become you know, whatever alternative protein factories. Is that your sense of how it was, how it went too?
Definitely. Not only that, but they show him what real beef tastes like, which ours is one of the best in the world. So yeah, definitely. And you reminded me of I don't remember if it's 30 or 30 something years ago when I was still abroad and I came back home and McDonald's tried to open here and they failed. Nobody, because we have the chivitos, which is the best beef sandwich in the world, and it's relatively cheap. But now, of course, McDonald's is in and it's heavy. But when they first came, it failed. Nobody liked that taste. So I think it's going to. What is very interesting, I think, is the way that the consumers are learning what they need to consume. So back to what you were saying, how the government will never do anything. They do small steps because they know the consumers are asking and it's the time they're on power. But they will never commit because they will lose the next election or whatever. I mean, if they change. But by telling the consumers what they're eating and what they could eat, that's the way it will change. And the beauty of Uruguay is that we're such a small amount of people that it's easy to reach the consumers. Very easy.
And then just one brief point, because I think some people who begin to learn about factory farming, the first place they're told to or the first thing they're told to do is just don't eat meat, become vegan. This will solve everything. And I wonder if you could just briefly explain why that's a misguided approach.
As we learned, if we don't have the cow, then we won't have a lot of species around, and the soil will not regenerate, and we will have much more trouble than if we would have herds and herds and herds. Plus, every animal the problem is that we forgot that we're part of the planet. We are above some kind of as humans, and so by forgetting that we're part of a system, we don't realize that we all need a predator. And us without predators, you'll see how we're doubling the amount of humans in the planet in 60 years. It's nothing in history, and we're increasing the amount of population. But why? Because we don't have predators, and every animal needed a predator before. So if we don't have somebody to look after the cows, we will be invaded by cows first. Second, the people who don't like the go, I don't either. I think that's horrible. I don't want my cow or my pig caged in a place or put in a place with no grass. They need green grass. No, their system is not designed to eat grains. And from then you go to the monocultures of soy and corn to feed these animals, and it's all wrong. But on the other hand, what is interesting is that all these vegans and activists, they all have, it's a generalization, which I shouldn't, because I was a vegetarian once in Vietnam when people offered me cat and dog and snails and snakes. I was just a vegetarian by caution for a while. But nowadays, when you see all these people screaming in the streets against the treatment we give to the animals, which they should come to my farm and see how we have a name almost for every cow. They all dye their hair red, blue, or green. They all have their bodies tattooed. They all have their, as I said the other day, so all those chemicals that go into their bodies, that's more nauseous than eating grass-fed beef. Plus, they eat soy, everything based in soy, and soy is mostly transgenic or GMO modified. What do you say?
Yeah, GMO.
Genetically GMO. And so, they're doing more harm to themselves than they really realize. I think it's a fashion. We're a lot of people on the planet, and this fashion will continue for those people who believe in this as like a religion. And it will be another religion. That's it. How many Muslims do you have? X amount. How many, atheists do you have? X amount. Then you'll have amount of vegans.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I think I increasingly think so too. But I'm glad we're talking about that too, because I think for a lot of people, there's a big propaganda machine behind that, because it's extremely profitable. It's more profitable to get people off the, small scale farmers off the land, to put everything in soy. This is happening all across Africa right now with the Gates Foundation, where they're just putting everything in climate smart agriculture, and it's just failing catastrophically. I shouldn't be laughing. It's failing. It's horrible, and I think people don't know that. They just don't see that. They just see the propaganda. So, okay, so this event we went to together, I want to talk about it, and also in sociology. So I've done my research in sociology, and I do like ethnography. And usually when you do ethnography, maybe just saying this for our audience too, you try to find somebody who's what's called a key informant. And this person is somebody who can help you, who has experience in your world and the world of the place you're trying to learn about. So they can tell you if your observations are correct or not. So maybe we can talk a little bit about this event, and you can tell me, I can share some observations, and you can tell me whether or not I was seeing what was happening correctly. But maybe let's just start by having you explain what the event was, and then we can go into more details of what happened there.
Okay, as I said, we meet twice a year, and this time, I don't know why, one of the girls who is a Pampeana decided to do it in a community site next to her farm. And the lady in the community site is often managing meetings, and they're more meditation, and it's like a sacred place. So this community area was ideal to do what our purpose was, which was to show people how we could eat well, produce well, and then get some knowledge from the experts doing these things. So the people who were invited to talk was a person who's an expert in not holistic management, but management of, like Voisin, he does that, is rational management of cattle. Then a lady who does a lot of products using fungi to fight ticks and all kinds of things that are supposedly bad to the environment. And then there were other speakers, like producers and microbiologists, and people doing homeopathy with animals, people who know about the value of the biological value of the intake of the products you take for your body, the results on your body. There were people talking about how to convert animal dung and leftovers from your farm into gas and a liquid fertilizer for your farm. There were people talking about permaculture, people talking about networking producers in order to find produces that you cannot grow in your farm or you cannot reach in the city. And maybe I forget.
I don't know. I had to leave before he spoke, but Agustin from La Viña, what did he speak about?
He was about their dairy production, organic dairy production of cow, sheep, and goat cheeses and butter.
Yep.
And also the menu for the 2 days was specifically designed, so it was all organic, locally grown, and there were people from around the area who were selling their arts, and other people were selling their products, which are organic products or bio products for the land and for the plants or for the animals. food stuff, and I think that's a general
Yes. Okay.
idea.
So a couple of details I want to point out as an outsider or non-Uruguayan. I have come to a few events like this, and I'm always so heartened by so much of the thought that goes into it. So when you go there, you know, there are comfortable places to sit. There's some place set up for the children to play. And I was there with my middle daughter, and there was a whole house which was like an earth building bioconstruction house that was set aside for children to play in, and there was an adult in there you know, teaching painting classes and this kind of thing. There's food available for everybody. It was super well run, you know, order your food and then they call it. It was all so fresh and delicious. You know, there were talks in one section, and you could go to the talks or you could go to this little market, this little feria that was going on that has all these like sort of sustainable both food but handcraft artisan you know, things, clothing. And so to me there's like a real care for you know, people's comfort and feeling welcome, and kind of getting it's hard to describe, but you can kind of be drawn to whatever you want to be drawn to at a time. You can go to a talk, you can go sit and chat with people, catch up with people, and eat a meal, have some mate around a fire. They had a fire going the whole time because it's in the fall, so it's, you know, the Uruguayans like to be cozy by the fire all the time. So I really liked that. You know, there's a lot of thought put into making people feel welcome and comfortable. Did you feel that same sense?
Definitely. Very much so. The lady who runs the community area, she was at the beginning when we were meeting before the event, I was like, oh, this lady, she's so enthusiastic and I'm different, but it worked really well. And she was very welcoming, very careful and observant of all the activities that were going on, making sure that she was that everybody was comfortable, like you say. And Zoe, who was the other organizer, she had amazing woman, and she had the intentions to attend the talks, and she couldn't because she would not leave the kitchen. And she's a magician in that kitchen, and she does beautiful stuff. And
it was so cool how I peeked into the kitchen. Everybody's moving around crazy, working so fast, working all the time, but like everyone's smiling and laughing. It was just really fun to see how they made all of these things together. And I've adopted drinking mate, and I went up to them and said, you know, can I have some hot water? They stopped what they're doing to get me some water for my thermos. It was, you know, I think just really cool to see how everyone was working together to pull the event together and make sure, you know, it was all running smoothly the whole time.
Yeah, they're used to that because they have a market every Saturday in that communal area. And we forgot about the bar.
Oh, yes. There's a
with
bar
kombucha
where they had a whole other section where it was like beer, chocolate and ice cream and kombucha and like I think smoothies too, something like that. So it was like a whole other section where it's like just go and enjoy it, have something tasty.
I know, it was amazing. So as I said, they do this every weekend to sell the produce, and they're used to this. I don't think they're used to having so many people 2 days in a row. That was, and they did very well. If I have to think of anything that went wrong, I can't, because everything went really smooth.
Yeah, it was really nice. And then just one other note on this, and we'll move on, but there were also like hammocks, so you could like go and sit in a hammock and just relax for a while, and no one would bother you. I just love that so much. Like in the US, I don't think you would find an event like that that would have that same feeling. You know, maybe you would find some kind of hippie event, but you would feel like weird because it would be like too many hippies or something.
And that was the other thing. You know, in Rocha, the capital of the province, which is 11 kilometers away from this place, the people from the community are seen as hippies. And these people don't come to their market. Even though they have these beautiful produces every weekend, they don't come because they're the hippies. And this time, because there was a fair and they offered them a space to sell their products, the handicraft people came and the television came and the radio station, and they said, oh, you hippies were not that bad after all. Amazing. We all have this.
So, okay, so then the next thing I want to get into is this. As a sociologist, I'm always looking at like, who are the groups of people here? And so I observed that there were, you know, these people, these hippies more or less, but I think hippies nowadays are a little bit different. I think they're like, you know, the community is well run, that, you know, they're big into regenerative agriculture. It's almost like more responsible hippies than the ones of the past. But we have these hippies who are like part of this intentional community. And then we have these experts who were speaking on all these different topics, who you were describing, who I think seem to occupy a place. They're interested in regenerative agriculture, but they're very serious about what they do. And they're not just hippy dippy. They're like, you know, hardworking, and they know what their stuff. And there's a whole range, but, you know, like microbiologists and people who have started businesses and extremely successful farms and different operations. And then I noticed there's just these kind of regular rancher types who are there. And I wonder, I don't know enough about this world, the rural rancher type world, because everybody I know around here who does regenerative agriculture or agroecology, they're like on the hippie spectrum, kind of the people that I know. I don't know a lot of the rancher types, like, you know, traditional gaucho, who are getting into this. So I'm wondering your thoughts about that. I was at a talk with who is the guy who does the Voisin, who spoke, Juan
Dutras, yes.
Yes, and he was, I mean, you know, talking deep ecological knowledge about how the cow interacts with the landscape. And these guys, you can see them, they're dressed traditionally. They have the hat, the, you know, beret type hat, to describe for people who don't know. And they're asking all of these deep ecological questions. Obviously, people who are on the land normally, on a daily basis, and they want to learn. So I'm wondering, did you observe this? What is your take on this, these different groups coming together?
Most definitely. It's, as I said at the beginning, it's starting to be heard. And ranchers here, they cultural, or they have forestation, you know, eucalyptus, and they have thousands and thousands of acres. But the small ones, those who are 2,000 acres or 3,000 acres, those are small here. Those are worried, and they see that if you don't start looking for options, they won't be able to produce and survive and feed their families and educate their children, because the products here are so expensive. Workers are expensive. The law, I mean, what you have to pay the Social Security is so expensive. So a lot of our money goes into that. So you have to look for options. Plus, they see that the soil is depleted. So I would say, in a family of 4, my age, I am 60. In my family, we're 3 people. I met one friend from the north where I grew up there, and he's a member of a family of 4. So in my family, only I changed my head, right, as a farmer. In his family, he's changing his head. So if we have 1 per family, that's very good, because on Sunday at lunchtime, they're going to be listening, the other 3 or the other 2, or whoever. So slowly, it's not everybody's ready to change, you know that, and that happens all over the world. But the conditions of the market, of the prices we pay for labor and Social Security, as I said, and the depletion of the land and the toxic that we're eating and smelling and inhaling is such that people are thinking, well, if he is doing this. I mean, the first ones are real heroes here, like Juan Dutra. He was talked by millions of ranchers saying he's the crazy one who's dividing the land. But he produced 3 times more than his neighbor, and he was the crazy one. Slowly, people are daring to. It's very traditional, very, very traditional society here. So, but people are listening, and if you have the head, then. So I was very glad to see those kind of farmers that you mentioned. Very glad to hear that they were making questions, and very glad that their girlfriends or wives are calling me. Even today I received a call.
Oh, really?
To be part of Pampeanas. Yes. And where can I go for this, and how can I move towards this? So it's happening. It does have an impact. So we're planning already our next meeting in the north, so we can reach other people.
That's so great.
Very great.
Yeah, that was the main observation I kept taking away is, I think in the US there's a very similar process going on. You've got like maybe young urban people who are looking to do something like this, and they have maybe more of a sustainability idea behind it. And then you've got the traditional agriculturalists or ranchers. And there's a little bit of a culture clash, obviously, between these groups, even though they might have the same goals in mind. And it's, for me, the main part of my work is trying to find a way to get those people to see where they have overlapping goals and where they can work together. Because I don't think you're going to stop a lot of people leaving the city. Increasingly, people just don't want to do it anymore. And then they get onto some land. I imagine there are possibilities of relationships where these, older rancher types start to move towards regenerative agriculture and then connect with the younger people. And then they sort of co-learn together. And, maybe I'm being too naive that this can't work in the US, but in Uruguay, I noticed at least at this event, and I've seen it in other places too, a real mutual respect. There is a way to be, to understand, like, I'm not going to, maybe it's because it's a small country, but the idea is I'm not going to just alienate these people right from the bat. Like, I'm not going to write them off immediately. Maybe they have something to teach me. And I noticed a real mutual respect and exchange, respect among all the people there. And that was really exciting to me.
Very nice. Yeah. I think there are a lot of city people, young, they want their children to be healthy, so they're being careful. Plus, I think that 2 years lockdown with the pandemic made people think of what was happening around the world. And I will give you an example of the small town that is near our house. A lot of these hippies came to live there because it's very quaint, it's very nice, it's very countryside, houses are large, they have big gardens. So a lot of these people came to live, and they were looked down by the locals because they are very easygoing and tattoos and the clothes, and as you know. But they're now, after a few years being there, they see that they're like a very strong community of people helping each other for a good cause. I mean, these kids, these young couples are there, and they're doing good things to their children, to the community they're helping. So I think the old generation is afraid of changes as usual, but the young generations are coming with these new voices and requests, which is because they see that the future is, if they don't start doing and taking actions, what we did or our parents did was not right. So there's only one planet, and they're worried about that, and that's why they need urgency in our actions. And that's why I think it's happening.
Yeah. And I think that there are better and worse ways to move into a local community. You can be respectful, you can listen to people, you can figure out what it is that they're their goals are, and you can contribute to it. You can be quiet for a little while and learn how things work before inserting this kind of thing. You can be more thoughtful and less. But I was really, really excited about how I saw, I saw this one. It was like an old grandma talking about how she had, was hand sowing seeds in her property, talking to these rancher guys and talking to this expert, and everyone's just sharing information, and lots of people telling jokes. Just it really felt convivial. I don't know if this word translates, but it was convivencia, this event. So it's like a very similar feel. It was really, really nice. Any other thoughts that you want to share about the event itself, or the outcomes of it, or what we should be looking forward to? And maybe next we can talk a little bit about what you think, advice for the rest of the world. How can we start moving in this direction more generally as just regular people?
Well, the result of the event it was so positive that the next weekend people wanted more, and they were asking, why don't you do it more often? And even the city dwellers from that area, not us, we're used to this because we often do this. What I think is that it's so rewarding to stay the night, never do a one-day event, because the night is when we all unplug, we all sit and relax, and that's when the real mixing and sharing happens, and I think that is a must, a 2-day event or 3. The Pampeanas, when we started, we did a 1 night over. Now we're going on to 2 because they're so enriching, and we share so much in the after hours, because usually we're studying or learning or going to other places, so we respect the owner of the ranch we visit, or the person who's exposing their knowledge to us. So we cannot talk, we interact, like you're saying, we ask questions and we joke, because that's the way Uruguayans are. But we cannot share the underground, the unsaid stuff, the unspoken truth, which is what we do at night, and especially if you add some wine to the salad, it really works. But that is for me a must. Then is to keep the flame alive, is to never stop communicating, always create new events or interesting things to look at. Now, for example, we're planning our second meeting of the year, and we are saying, instead of going to people who think like us, let's go to a soy grower and ask them, why do you do this? So that would be a real challenge to us, not to vomit all the way.
Oh, I lost you for a second. Okay, you're back. Go ahead.
Okay, we're back. Okay, I got you. You were frozen for a while. So yeah, I think it takes energy, and it takes a lot of will to do this, but it's so passionate. As I always say, I have no children. I could do without all this studying or time consuming, or my giving to others, the community I live here. We're starting what do you say, recycling process of cardboard and food and this and that with all these young couples that I told you about. I could sit here and do my vegetable garden and look after my animals and enjoy life. But I think it's an obligation we all have, due to the information we get of the status of the planet and how things are. We're running out of time, and I think it's imperative to keep moving. So these meetings, and again, Uruguay has the biggest chance to show the world, because we're a small community. And even though we're a very urbanized country, the people who are in the land, we can teach by doing what we do. And going back to what we were talking about, having the hippies or the youngsters with the tattoo ones who are carrying this message around. Well, there are the odd ones like me who look a little bit straight and have a, I don't know, straight life for those who are looking for that, who can, take the flag of this and say regeneration is not only for hippies, it works for everybody, and it's a good way to take.
Yeah. And I see the same thing happening in the US. I think it's just one of those things where the tide is going in some direction, and there really isn't another option. I mean, there is no other option. You can't just keep going with this industrial way of doing things. It's poisoning everybody. It's failing. There's no fertilizer anyway, so people are forced to change. One of the quotes I often say on this podcast is that Americans always do the right thing when they have no other choice. I think it's everybody gets forced into doing the right thing at some point. So I think it's good. I'm so grateful you came on, Magdalena. Any other parting words before we end?
Nothing. Keep believing for what you think it's right, and then things happen.
Yep. Wonderful. Okay, so thank you so much for coming on. Well,
thank you.